Hello to everybody watching at home. My name is Laura Day, I'm with St.Ation, and today I'm joined by Katy Lee, hoping to become your next Director of Wellbeing. In the next 10-15 minutes, I'll be asking Katy a few questions about their manifesto and the person behind it to help you decide who to vote for later this week. So with introductions over, let's get started with some questions about your manifesto. So first of all, I've asked every other candidate this. How has COVID affected your manifesto?
I mean, COVID has affected really every aspect of our lives, every aspect of our university experience. I think when I was writing the manifesto, what I wanted to focus on was responding to how things are going to change. I don't think that any of us really would have expected that a year down the line we would still be dealing with this crisis and not be able to see our friends or go to classes or be in the position that we're in right now in the slightest. And it's really hard to say, in the next month, 2 months, or year, where we're going to be with that situation. So I want to focus on adjusting to the situation as it advances, as it occurs, and responding to it more than trying to predict where we're going to be.
I mean, it's a very unpredictable situation, so we really have no idea. You discussed in your manifesto you wanted to improve the consent and diversity training. Since the diversity module was removed last year following backlash from the student community, how do you plan to create a more suitable course which avoids such issues?
Right. It was taken down for some very good reasons.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of a disaster. But again, it is a very important step that the university took. It just wasn't done properly. And I think the number one thing is that everybody has said is that you have to consult with the communities that are being affected. If you are going to talk about diversity, you need to talk to the people who are affected by diversity issues, whether that's LGBT people, the BAME community, whatever the situation is, even like issues of age and age discrimination. We need to take into account and talk to the people who are experiencing that kind of discrimination and design a module with them that represents the issues that they see, and not something that dismisses racism as something that will affect your career, but really to explain to people why this is not appropriate and why you shouldn't say or think these things.
Yeah, I mean, you've just mentioned it there, and many of your policies do involve collaboration with other societies in St Andrews, such as, the Disabled Students Network, LGBT+ Got Consent. So what experience do you have working as a team to ensure the best possible outcome?
Right. I have been involved in lots of different kinds of teams across the university, starting with the environmental network and now moving on to the well-being side of things. I've been working with the well-being subcommittee for the last year. And I think COVID probably more than anything has really shown us how difficult it is to do things by yourself. The events that we've hosted have been poorly attended when they're just things that we do on our own. But when we do collaborations with other groups like Got Consent, FemSoc, even things like Coffee Sock, these are just small things that we can do to sort of expand out there. And I think creating things that people are more interested in just based on a more particular niche is really important to get people interested in what we're doing, and get the word out there in terms of what is the well-being structure actually doing for students. And I think teamwork is probably the most important thing that a well-being director can do, because it's not just collaborating with students and societies, it's also collaborating with the university. And I don't have as much experience with working in the university as I would like at this point, but I have worked, I worked as a sort of unofficial warden a couple of summers ago and was closely connected with the residential team. And they are truly lovely people. Everybody that I have actually worked with at the university has been so willing to take care of the students. Going forward, I think we're going to run into a lot of issues in terms of how do we actually solve the issues that we're trying to solve. But I think the number one thing is remembering that these people aren't your enemies. They're not working against you. Everybody here is trying for the same point of making sure that our students are taken care of, that they're happy and healthy and safe, and just finding ways to communicate and negotiate that in a way that is effective for everyone.
Yeah, well-being is certainly a very important part of university, and my next question leads on from that, talking about first years, because they've had an incredibly challenging start to their university careers. You know, they've missed out on so much. So what additional support would you put in place to help incoming students adjust to life at St. Andrews?
I had a whole section of my manifesto dedicated to this and sort of talking about how we can better take care of incoming students, whether they're first years, postgraduates, or just study abroad students. And there's so many things that we can do. I think the number one issue that I keep coming back to repeatedly is just making things clear. Where do you go and find the information that you need? And then I think the university can do a lot more in terms of providing information and help on basic living. Just how do you set up a bank account? How do you get a phone plan? I mean, I was really lucky to come here with my dad a few weeks before term started, so I had that kind of help. But so many of my friends were literally just dropped off at the airport back home, sent on a plane abroad, and landed in the middle of nowhere, Scotland, with no clue of how anything works. And that is just, that's not okay. It's not okay. Like, if you don't know how the NHS works or how to set up a bank account, those first couple of weeks of terms are so stressful for everybody. And just basic little things in terms of where do you get the information can mean so much to those students.
Yeah, it's certainly a big adjustment for anybody going to university, so it's good to see those kind of things included in your manifesto. I mean, you've got lots of ideas and everything. What would be your top priority if you became Director of Wellbeing?
My top priority, and I'm going to say this is not necessarily my first course of action, but the number one priority is just increasing clarity, transparency, and accessibility to well-being resources. The number one issue that I am seeing with what is happening in well-being is a very similar issue to what I saw happening in the environmental side of things when I was working on that a few years ago, is that everybody wants to create something new, and that's a great thing. But if you aren't taking note of what's going on around you, or you don't have access to the information in terms of what's going on around you, we're all just sort of turning our wheels in the mud and not actually getting anywhere. So my number one goal, number one thing for becoming a DOWEL is making sure that people know who's doing what actions are being taken concerning what issues, and how you can get involved to be part of that, but in an effective way.
Mm-hmm. Well, now that we've explored your manifesto a little bit further, it's time to find out a little bit more about you, the person behind all of these policies. So first of all, I want to ask you, what inspired you to run for Director of Wellbeing?
I feel like this is always kind of a loaded question, because there's always like the formal, politically correct answer, and then all of the personal answers behind it. But I started looking at the position a few years ago because it was such a great opportunity. And then basically I forgot about it and just moved on with my life. But third year last year for me was so hard. And it wasn't just the COVID crisis. I was dealing with some really serious personal issues, and a lot of really bad things happened. And it was at that point that I started looking at well-being and trying to get help, and really needing it. And I didn't know where to turn. And going through that system and trying to figure out what was going on, and then survivors popping up at roughly the same time, and just trying to work through that whole system, it really highlighted that there were some serious issues. So when the opportunity came up to join the Wellbeing Network and the Wellbeing Subcommittee in like October, I immediately took the opportunity. I was like, great, how can I help make this more accessible to people and get people to know like what's going on? And working with the Wellbeing Subcommittee has been wonderful. They're some of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. So sweet. But there's still so much that needs to be done. And I don't think that I have contributed everything that I can to St. Andrews. There's this feeling that I'm not done here in a kind of way. Like, I still have things to say. Listen to me. Just sort of a vengeance to make sure that things happen, so that people in the future will never have to experience the kinds of things that I did, trying to find help when you're really just at your lowest. I think a lot of people who are running for this position have very similar experiences.
That's great. I mean, you mentioned there COVID, and it has had an effect on all the students. So what are you looking forward to most post-lockdown, if we ever get there?
Gosh, I was talking with my campaign manager about this, and really, I want to have a little get together, socially distanced, outside, whatever it takes, to thank all of my team members. That is my number one thing. I have close connections with my flatmates, and I get to see lots of people over Teams. It's not that bad for me, honestly, but I would really like to do something to just give them the biggest thank you that I can, because they have been amazing with keeping my spirits up with this and giving me some great ideas. So I think that's what I would really like to do.
Sounds great. I mean, we're all missing the social interaction that we used to take for granted right now. So, I mean, my next question is, describe your personality in 3 words.
Oh, what is a personality? I think I don't as a person, like, I don't know. I'm a plant mother. That is my number one personality trait. I just sit at home and tend to my 47 children. I don't know. I would like to think I'm funny. Basically, if you combined all of the dads in the world into like a condensed format, I would like to think of myself as just like the most condensed form of dad that you can get. I'm up at 11 a.m. making pancakes every single morning. I will help you try and fix things even if I don't know how. I'm always making really horrible puns, and I might come across as put together, but really I'm just like a little sludge monster that crawls around inside the house. So somewhere between like the canonical ideal of dad and maybe a little bit of like gremlin thrown in there on the side, but with a big heart.
So in the final minute, I'd like to give you the opportunity to say something to people watching at home right now. So why should they vote Katy Lee for Director of Wellbeing?
I think the number one reason why I'm running for this position is the number one reason why you should vote for me, which is responsiveness. I want to go into this position and listen. My goal isn't to come in with this set curriculum of things that I want to implement and that have to get done, because priorities change. And I want to be there to listen to the student concerns and help address those concerns as they come up. I want to be part of the community and directly engage with those people. I want to be there to represent the student body for students like you. That is my goal, is to make sure that the student voices are heard and that you don't feel like you've been left or forgotten about.
And with that, I'd like to thank Katy Lee very much for participating in this interview. I wish you the very best of luck with your campaign.